Today's guest is someone who understands that real leadership doesn't stop at the courtroom door. It extends into the community that you build around. Cassie Springer Ayeni is the president of Springer Ayeni, a professional law corporation, where she fights for people navigating disability benefit claims under ERISA. Very complicated work. But alongside that work, Cassie has become a powerful force for women in the legal profession. She co-chairs the ABA Labor and Employment Section's Women's Affinity Group with me, which I'm happy to say, and she co-founded the Women Employees Benefits Attorneys Affinity Group, and she also serves as a liaison to the American Bar Association's Commission on Women in the Profession. She's a Super Lawyers Top 100 lawyer in Northern California and a top 50 women attorney year after year. But what makes Cassie truly remarkable is her conviction that lifting other women up is not a side project, it's part of the mission. Cassie, welcome to Leadership Simply Smarter. Let's first talk a little bit about our shared journey. What do you think our mission is together as co-chairs of our WAG?
Uplifting women, encouraging women to find a place within the American Bar Association and community. I I really love it. I mean, the longer I've done this, I've been in practice for 24 years now. I realize that finding that community with people like you and the people in our group helps alleviate some of the stresses and burnout that are inherent to our profession. So I thoroughly enjoy it, and I think it benefits all of us as women to find people who we can talk to
Absolutely.
and commiserate with,
Absolutely, I
etc.
agree. I've read studies that talk about women, especially sort of in, 30s, 40s, 50s, that they desperately need to have the support and connection with other women to really thrive and succeed. And I think we do that in spades. At each of the ABA's labor and employment conferences, we try to provide, some type of self-care initiative. So why don't you talk about what we did the last time, which was really well received?
The last time was so fun. That was in Denver for our annual ABA Labor and Employment Law Section conference. And we had a woman come in who is dubbed the Kindness Concierge, and she's based in Denver. And she wanted to create these moments of kindness and activities of kindness for our group. So we had our breakfast so we could, break bread together. But then she had stations around the room. One of them was leaving words of affirmation for yourself on a mirror where you could talk about things you're good at, and then other people can see things you're good at. And one was, well, there were three
Right.
tables really because there were so many gifts. So everybody got to curate a box of gifts for themselves, blanket, a mug, just perfume, little things that can uplift you, tea satchels, uplift you and bring you a little bit of joy and comfort while you're traveling and away from family, or just taking care of yourself
Right,
while you
right.
are traveling and away from family, which is can be a form of self-care too. So it was just a lovely event. We all got to talk together, and she left little kindness notes on the tables too, which I've shared with my kids and kind of continued that tradition and writing my own notes for my kids for them to find when they need just a moment of
It was really
uplifting.
putting it in perspective. We managed to get over 50 women attorneys to show up at 7 a.m., during conference where people are dining and
Yeah.
wining and, having fun after hours. And they all show up, ready to share. And it's just a really lovely experience. And Cassie and I have gotten really close as a result of that. And, it's part of the ABA's DEI efforts, really to provide spaces. They have affinity groups for others as well, lesbian and gay and persons of color, and anybody's welcome to these, but most of the time we get women. Although in New York, I did get asked by a couple of the guys. We were making our own lotions and sugar scrubs, to take home with us. And a couple of the guys wanted to come in, and I'm like,
Yeah.
come right in. This is open. It's open to allies. So yeah, so it
Uh,
was really nice. And I
yeah,
told
no
Cassie
problem.
over a year later, I got a note from someone on LinkedIn just out of the blue saying how much they recalled spending time with us at that event and how much that meant to them. And I was like, wow,
And we have kind of a return of the same people
right?
year after year at that 7 a.m. hour who look forward to our event and find it to be one of the highlights of this huge, well-organized, packed conference, but our little 7 a.m. event is a highlight, and I love that so much, to find that moment of connection and
And it was
respite
wonderful
that
that
people can
Cassie and
share
I
together.
probably wouldn't have met otherwise, other than doing this, because we're in very different practice areas and
Yeah,
we're on two different coasts. You're West Coast, I'm East Coast, but we've really
yep,
forged a wonderful connection and we're very much like-minded about supporting women, uplifting women, and it's, both of us have that at a core value. So it's been great. As we
it's
got to
been
know
great.
each
It's been a
other,
great
we've
match.
shared some of our life experiences, and we're going to talk just a bit about one thing that we had in common. And, not to be too heavy, but this is real life. And especially after the pandemic, everybody talked about bringing your whole self to work. And so for Cassie and I, this shared experience that we had really is part of our life and part of our leadership journey. So we want to talk about it a little bit, not to bring everybody down, but, to tell others who are suffering in silence through any type of difficulty that there are others who are there to support you and you're not alone. So, Cassie, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the oddities, I think, of our culture is that there is a shroud of silence around something that can affect so many people in so many different ways. And in our particular case, it's loss of a child. I'm a mom of five, and one of my children, one of my firstborn children, she was an identical twin named Ella Rose, and she's a twin with my surviving twin, Kate, who's now 17 and headed off to college. But Ella Rose only lived 17 days. She died of an infection in the NICU that only affects premature babies. And it was life altering and tragic, and something that was incredibly difficult to come back from. It just, I feel like in my life, there's a pre Cassie, the one before losing a child, and there's everything after. And I just, it's totally changed who I am as a person. And I'm glad that you're having this forum, because I think a lot of people have suffered loss, maybe not loss of a child, but it could be loss of someone close in your life. And it's hard to know how to go on and maintain a semblance of normalcy. And yet, this shared experience of loss and suffering is humanity. I mean, we all have that as human beings, and so being able to talk about it openly, I think, is really profound.
Honestly, this is the first time I've
Yeah.
spoken very publicly about my loss. I lost my firstborn son, Evan Michael Kelly, in 2017 to a tragic accident. And he was 24 years old at the time. And, just like you, I have a pre Vanessa and a post Vanessa. And honestly, I'm still struggling with the post Vanessa. There's the one thing that I have found is that there's not a timetable for grief. And maybe I've gone over the part of it where I really couldn't get out of bed on most days to being able to function, but it's there all the time. In fact, I got a tattoo last year on my forearm, which is a Celtic mother's symbol. It's, the Celtic rings, but it's shaped like a mother and a child sitting in her lap. And I did that because I felt like I wanted something demonstrable to show that I'm forever changed by this event in my life. Yeah.
One too. I didn't know that. Yeah, I got one too about
Yes.
2 years after she
Yeah.
passed.
Cassie and I know we both got grief tattoos.
I've known since I was young that I wanted to become a mom and a lawyer, but I knew I wanted to become a mom. And I had a hard time. This was my first marriage. I've since remarried, and I had a hard time pregnant. So I actually had IVF and conceived on the first try these identical twins. They didn't know they were identical because two eggs were implanted, and I got pregnant with two embryos. But when they were born, first of all, when I was pregnant with them, they would sync up their hearts, Kate and Ella, and that I was admitted for preterm labor at 25 weeks. I was dilated to 3 centimeters. And I stayed in the hospital for the rest of the pregnancy, which was another 6 weeks. So I was for 6 weeks in the hospital, and I would be monitored daily with these heart monitors to make sure the twins were doing all right. And I remember one of the nurses saying to me, because they were in different sacks too, and the nurse was like, "It's so weird that their hearts sync up like that. Usually only identical twins sync up their hearts." I'm like, "Well, they're not
Mhm,
identical. I
mhm.
had two embryos implanted, you know?" And but then when they were born, they looked exactly alike. And their hearts weren't sinking because they were in
Right.
different cribs. They call them isolates in the NICU. But then after a week, they were both doing so well that they were put in the same crib and their hearts started syncing up again. And so I always had this like question, like, I even remember thinking when they were born, when I bring them home, I'm gonna have to like paint one girl's nails red and
Me
the other
too.
purple. So I know who's who because they looked so much alike. Ella was a little bit smaller than Kate, but other than that, I mean, and there was just like,
Right,
a
wow.
4 ounce difference. It was nothing. So, yeah, and they were small, but by managing, I mean, I don't know how I did it. I was on bed rest in the hospital on
Uh-huh.
continuous 24/7 magnesium intravenously to stop contractions for 6 weeks. And I had some scares where they thought I was going to deliver. When I was first admitted, the doctor said that there was most people deliver within a week of being admitted, and there was an 80% chance that
Wow.
one or both of them would not survive because I was 25 weeks pregnant. So I was just I was willing to do absolutely anything to stay pregnant, and I don't know how I did, but I did. It's really hard to. Most people don't stay pregnant when they're 3 centimeters dilated. I actually held the record for my hospital for the longest preterm
Something you
delivery
necessarily wanna
admission.
have, but,
And then eventually, at 31 weeks and 1 day, my water actually broke, and at that point, there's no going back. And so I delivered, and they were both healthy. Kate did not need any oxygen help. She was breathing on her own from the start, no complications. She was under 4 pounds, and so was Ella, but they were just really healthy for 31-week twins. And Ella needed a little bit of oxygen, so I couldn't hold her at first. I couldn't hold her for the first 2 days. I could hold Kate right away. But Ella, I needed to wait a couple days, and I was pumping and, doing all the things, help getting them the breast milk. I've been told, and it's true, that breast milk helps premature babies, especially.
right.
So I wanted to do absolutely everything I could. And after 2 days, I got to hold Ella, and I will never forget that moment. I held her on my chest and she opened her eyes and looked straight up at me. And I could still feel, the weight of her and see her blue eyes as she looked up at me. And it was just a really special moment. And then they both got better, that the nurse said they're feeder growers. That meant all they had to do to leave the NICU was feed and grow. And once they hit 36 weeks gestation, which is full
Right.
term, they would probably get discharged. So we were trucking along and doing great, and Elle was off oxygen, so they let Kate and Ella share
That's
a bed
amazing.
again. That's when they started syncing up their hearts. And yeah, it was really great, and I got plenty of pictures. I got to hold them. I got to breastfeed both of them at the same time and kind of
I
imagine that was
can't
going to be my
I
life,
can't
like
imagine that,
one
I
one
can't.
attached to each. Took a little nap together, me holding them in the NICU, because they didn't have a lot of. They had their leads on, but they were doing great. And then something I didn't know that can happen happened to Ella, and it only happens to premature babies, which is an infection of the intestines called necrotizing enterocolitis. Came viciously and unexpectedly. Nobody expected it, and it was the evening that she would just had a bath. We gave her
Mhm.
and Kate baths in the NICU, and then I went home to sleep for the night, and I got a call in the middle of the night that her intestines were not reacting well to bacteria, which is what necrotizing enterocolitis is. It's a deadening and infection of the intestines. So, of course, went straight to the hospital and got the news and monitored her all day, and she was getting worse and worse over the day. And then ultimately her bowel perforated, which required surgery. And she got surgery that night when she was 14 days old. And they had to take out, it was really bad.
Oh,
80% of her gut
that's
had already
horrible.
died that quickly within a day. And they removed it. It was really horrible. They removed it, and there was no they brought her back up. I saw her open her eyes on the way down to surgery. I was there with her. That was the last time I saw her open her eyes. And then when she came back, they fought so hard to
Mhm.
keep her alive after the surgery, like just nonstop IVs and medications to just keep her alive. And then the next morning, Saturday morning, I was alone and it was just the worst moment of my life where the doctor said,
Ugh,
this is not compatible with life. And you have to make a decision. You have
yeah,
to, sorry, I know this is going to be hard, but
right.
it still is 17 years later, as it never goes away. It's continuous. Yeah, that I would need to take her off of life support, that was the humane thing to do. And so I sat with that and we talked with, of course, got other opinions and got her baptized. And then on Monday morning, made the decision and on Monday afternoon took her off life support. And this heart rate thing. So when she came off life support, I was in a room with a nurse and Kate, and they took her off of the life support, and I was holding her and singing to her and showing her the world outside of the
Oh my
hospital
God.
window that I knew she wouldn't see. And then she took her last breath, and Kate's monitors started
Wow.
beeping. Kate stopped breathing when Ella took her last breath. Yeah. So, because their hearts, they're together. The nurse was there, so she jiggled Kate, and Kate, took a breath. That's preemies often forget to breathe. But it was
That
just
is so
amazing
scary
that it
because
was
their
that
hearts
moment
had been
that it
syncing up, and
happened.
then, you know, to have her experience that at the
Yeah.
same time, that's just,
Yeah. And it just speaks to me about how their connectedness, and it's just amazing to me. And then Ella passed, and then I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but like for the next
I
two
know,
weeks, I have
right?
so few memories because my brain, it just, I remember doing everything possible to get Kate home. That's all I remember. And it's just a few flashes, but I have almost no recollection of things for the next 2 weeks after. I remember all the details leading up
But not,
to
yeah.
her death. And then my brain me
And
from that intense grief
I,
the 2 weeks
and I
after, and
think
I
that's
still
what
can't
happened. Your
recall
brain
most of it.
sometimes shields you from very painful things.
Yeah.
For me, it was very unexpected. I had gotten up super early from my house to drive to Philadelphia, which was about 2.5 hours from my house, because I was speaking in the morning at like 8:30 a.m. At a CLE and unemployment agreements. And actually, one of our
Yeah.
ABA friends was the co-speaker. I had turned off my phone because I didn't want my phone going off when I was speaking and everything. And then when I was done speaking, I still had like an afternoon session, but there was a good break of time during the day. So I went and had lunch with a couple of the other speakers, and I put my phone on, and that's when I saw all of the texts from my youngest son, Gregory. It was just blowing up, and he left me a voicemail, and it was, Evan is dead. And I thought, in my mind, I thought I heard him say Evan's dead because he took my car. Gregory had just gotten a new car, and Evan's car was kind of a junky one. And um, I thought that's what it was. And I thought I was going to be calling and listening to some squabble between two brothers. And there's a bit of an age difference, like 7-year age gap between Gregory and his older brother. And that wasn't what it was at all. Evan had been battling addiction for 4 years, and I thought we were home free because the night before we had actually had his last session, and he was being released. And then unfortunately, they said it's sometimes very common that when people get released from treatment that they do one last high because it's like their send off. And unfortunately, what Evan was using was mixed with fentanyl. And so the poor guy didn't have a chance at all. So when I was giving my speech, Gregory was home, and then Gregory went downstairs in the man cave. They had a man cave, and he went down and he found his brother, and it was just too late for everything. And then he called me, and then I had to drive home. And I don't even know how I drove home from Philly. I remember I couldn't find my ticket at the garage, so paid the highest thing. And I remember searching through this garage over and over and over looking for my car. And I don't really remember very much at all getting home. And and then I got home and they were taking him, and my other son, Brendan, he came up with his dad, and the three of us were there. And I just don't remember a lot after that. I really don't. It was just so shocking. So, and it is
Yeah.
something you don't get over. Let's talk about how, your journey, what it looked like when you tried to get back into work. And, for me, when this happened, I had just
Yeah.
joined Clark Hill maybe about a year before. It was almost one full year. And I had been practicing law for a long time. So I had my own clients. I was climbing the partnership ladder and all that stuff. I had had my own firm for years, and I had decided now that the kids were all older, I was going to go back to big law. And so this was my new journey. It was a bit of a step up for the career to get back into big law. And so I had a heavy plate at that time. So, how about you?
I did too. I actually had just opened my law firm. I'd just gone on my own, left a law firm and opened. So I was pregnant when I opened my law firm. And I had a partner at the time, and, thank goodness I did because
Right.
I don't know what would I have done. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks, and even taking a phone call would cause contractions, which I knew because I was constantly monitored. So I
Wow,
couldn't
that's
even work
right.
for the six
Yeah.
weeks I was in the hospital. And yeah, and then having babies in the NICU and then losing a child. It was just a triple whammy. And our firm was fledgling, and so there wasn't that much work, but it was still
Right.
imperative that I return to work. I I mean, I had made this commitment to myself, to my partner, to the clients who had come with us and new ones we were finding to do work. And I don't know, Vanessa, by brute force, I returned to work, by obligation. And in some ways, I feel like
Hmm.
that's that was helpful
Hmm.
because it was something to get me out of bed. Besides Kate, who was
Right.
also my other
Right.
reason for getting out of bed, and she was amazing. How like knowing somebody needed me. I don't know how people who've lost a child and don't, like it's so like I
Right.
had
Right.
somebody else who required me. It wasn't her job to take care of me in that way, but she did. Like I could get out of bed because I needed to nurse my daughter who I loved. But my firm I loved also. I wanted it to be successful. So I actually Ella died on June 30th of 2008, and in September of that
Oh my
year, I
gosh.
argued a Ninth Circuit case. And I had, yeah, and it was on a case which I had not been previously involved, but the attorney on it was a colleague, and he was traveling when the oral argument had been scheduled, and I had some, expertise and experience with Ninth Circuit arguments before, so he called me and asked me to take over the briefing. There was supplementary briefing and oral argument, and so I actually got up to speed on this case and argued it within, a month,
That
even
I
though I
don't know
was in
how
the
you
depths
did.
of
The amount of
despair.
concentration and,
Yeah,
commitment to
no,
doing that is just
yeah,
huge. Right.
yeah, it was like because I had to. I
Right.
don't think that that's the healthiest way necessarily, but I was also having a hard time finding a good therapist. My health provider was really really terrible about, getting me connected with somebody with
Right.
expertise who had good availability, and so I had gone at that point for, like, 10 weeks without
I
therapy,
know.
which is, like, incredible, so I finally found a good one and paid out of pocket and got myself just to somebody who had expertise in grief, and she was really helpful, but
Mhm.
I did what I had to do. And part of that survival was making sure my firm survived. And I've now been self-employed for 18 years. So I guess it worked, but like talk about
I
jumping into the deep end of the
I,
pool
I
at
feel
that
like
time,
as
you
women,
know?
so often we do that. We just, sort of push ourselves to the brink
Yeah.
because we have to. And in addition to shouldering, work
Yeah.
responsibilities, you had a newborn.
Yeah.
It must have been incredibly hard to go home from the hospital with one baby and not two. And then, I always think
Oh,
about this like unspoken connection that twins have with each other. You know, ha- like I would worry, like,
yeah.
I'm sure she felt something, in these moments, and that I would have been worried about that,
Yeah.
just
Um,
everything. And
I still worry about it with her. I mean, we talk about Ella, but yeah, she's everybody's
yeah, and
affected by
and it's
Ella's loss in
sometimes
my
like
family. Yeah.
because I was so heavy in my grief, sometimes I forgot how difficult it was for my two boys to survive the loss of their older brother. Brendan had said,
They were
well,
older
now I'm the
too. Yeah.
oldest, and he and Evan were very close. They were only 16 months apart. And Gregory, he was
Yeah.
7 years younger, but so close to Evan. I mean, when he was a baby, Evan used to get him up, change his diaper, give him a bottle, watch cartoons with him. And even, when this was going on, he was home with him. And when he'd come home from high school, he'd have a little snack for him. He'd be waiting at the bus because not that Gregory needed a chaperone, but he was just excited to see his little brother and, figure out what was going on. And it was wonderful to have Evan there because, he taught Gregory how to drive in the snow, and I'm a big wimp, so I couldn't do that. So they had these bonds, and, I forgot how much, grief would impact them. And it still does. When my youngest son turned
Still does.
24,
Yeah.
he's like, I'm now the age, Evan was when he passed. And then when he turned 25, he's like, I can't believe I'm older than Evan was because he was always my big brother. So it was weird to see him that way. So so for me, I don't remember a whole
Yeah.
lot when I went back to work. I remember feeling it was good to be there, but I kept my door closed because I couldn't have anybody say anything to me while I was at work about my loss because I would lose it. So I had to be like, this is work mode. So I would keep my door closed. I would muscle through and get my work done. And at least that's what I tried to do. It certainly slipped out a whole bunch of times. Like we were planning a luncheon for our office at Christmas, and I like lost it in the middle of the meeting. And this one woman who was older than me said, of course you don't feel like talking about Christmas lunches. Your whole world is upside down. Why don't you just go home and like you could sit out the Christmas lunch, it's not that important. And I remember feeling that
Yeah.
that was good, but I absolutely couldn't tolerate mixing those. It was like it took all my strength just to show up at work. And sometimes I couldn't. There was a period of time where and this was pre-COVID, pre people working from home, but I said I need to work from home because I'm not sleeping. I would be driving home from work and not realize, why did I end up on this road? This isn't the way home. And I wouldn't remember getting on the road. It's like, this really isn't safe to be driving if you
Right.
can't, if you're not cognizant of which road you're on. That's not a good
Yeah.
sign. So they were really good to me and let me, work from home when I needed to because I had a very heavy workload. I really
Yeah.
did. And I remember in the beginning, some people covered it, but I had clients that were my clients for years, and it wasn't gonna, they were gonna need me at some point. So I couldn't really take that time. And I don't know if that would have been the best thing either. So just like you said, I don't know if it was the best thing to just jump in, but I don't know if staying home would have been worse. So yeah,
I mean, there's no roadmap for grief or loss of a child or loss of anyone. Just have to wing it and do what you can and what's needed. It wound up in retrospect shaping who I am as a business owner and a mom because well, first of all, Kate was still a premature
right,
baby with health, concerns, right? So she was little and I wasn't allowed to put her in daycare until the first winter flu season had passed. Well, allowed is a strong word, but like highly recommended that I not put her around other
right,
kids
right,
because, kids get really sick all the time when they're around other kids. Yeah. And it would be really hard on her little lungs. So I brought her into the office with me out of necessity because I didn't feel like I had a choice. And I didn't have another solution. And it wound up being the best thing it was fantastic. I loved having her in the office with me. It's
Mhm.
kind of funny, but I like almost had no walls because first of all, everybody
Right.
knew I had twins, and then I'm here with one baby. So it's an obvious thing when anybody was looking at me. And I actually felt there was some catharsis in being able to talk about her, and there still is, like, I love that. I love when I hear Ella's
Right.
name or people mention her or remember her, on their birthday or on the anniversary of her death or just other occasions too. It's I mean, I think about her every day anyway, so it's just really nice when people bring up her name. So and then I had Kate in the office with me, and I'd bring her to I'd bring her to co-counsel meetings and opposing counsel meetings and client meetings, and she was just there. I remember I had a phone call one time, and I was like, "I know that there's a baby crying in the background, but I can hear you, and I know what you're talking. I'm with you in this
I
conversation.
was
So
gonna
if
say
you're
that's
okay
a
with that,
nice
I'm
way
okay
to
with
like butter up a bad
it." My client,
adversary or a really stern judge. You have this baby there, you know?
right? Baby, what am I gonna do? A couple of times, if I had an oral argument, my mom would come to the courthouse with me and then wheel her around the block while I was arguing, and then I'd breastfeed her afterwards or whatever. I mean, she couldn't
Uh,
go to daycare. What
See,
was
and
I
that's
gonna
another
do?
thing. We just figure out a way to
So,
do it. For you, you did have your own firm,
yeah,
so you could make the rules, and this is just the way it's going to be. But on the other hand,
yeah.
it's a lot. You still had to juggle a lot.
Yeah. And I went on to have 3 more children, and others in my firm have had children too. And it's remained the policy of my firm for these 18 years that children are welcome in our office. Everybody's, not just premature ones, but anybody who needs to bring their kid in. All of my kids have been office babies. Kate, I got her in daycare when she was
Hmm.
11 months old, right after the flu season passed. So she was with me 11 months. Megan was with me. She's my next. She's 15 now, and she was with me until I think she was 8 months old, and then she was kind of she was a meaty baby. She was 9 pounds full term. She was like robust. She was amazing, most amazing baby.
Right,
But she was like ready for daycare. And then 5 years later, I divorced and remarried, and I had a lot of
right,
relationships crumble and loss of a child too. By the way, that's something that is worth acknowledging. And there were, of course, many issues before that, but that was obviously a final straw, if not the is losing a child. But I found my wonderful husband, and we had 2 more children too. And Ife stayed with
right,
me for about a year in the office. And then Deepal, he was my youngest. He's 8 years old now, and he stayed with me. He was so chill. It's such a good office baby. He was actually with me for,
wow.
I think, 18 months in my office. Because he just wanted to be around
Oh,
mom. He still does.
I
He's still
love
like
that.
that.
I
He was
love
my little
that.
snuggle buddy. Right when I got him in, I'm like, okay, it's time. He needs to at least be around other kids. So I got him in daycare, and then 6 weeks later, the pandemic hit. So then he was back home with me for another year and a half or 2 years or something. So he was with me almost all of his baby
Right.
and toddlerhood in the office. Well, with all of us because was home in the pandemic
Ah,
too. But yeah, and his siblings. I still to this day, like I have a room designated for kids in my office suite where I have games and books and crafts and a big TV with Disney, and other apps where they can watch and a mini fridge to make it comfortable for them and for parents, like in the summertime. And my kids I work at home most of the time, but when I go into the office, they're always, oh, can we go too? They love it because I have little, candies around the office. They can watch
right.
TV and lounge. They feel like big
The
kids in their
snacks are
own
different at the
room.
office than home,
But
probably, right?
But that, both losing Ella and then having a premature baby is what set in motion what's become a core characteristic of who I am as a lawyer, as an employer, as a woman attorney, and it's something that I really encourage other law firms to consider. And I think it would help anybody if you've lost a child or you're going through anything in life, like the option of sometimes being able to
Right.
hold a little tighter to the ones you have, and bring them with you as you did, I think could be really helpful. So if there are, things that compassionate law firms can do, I think having an environment where maybe it's not like obviously 8 hours a day every day isn't going to work for the kids, but like knowing that there's a space where the kids feel welcome to come in and hang out during the
Yeah,
workday
just
would be
just to
really
deal with
helpful for people, I think.
situations that come up and things like that. Yeah, no, I definitely hear you, and I
Yeah.
love that that was a positive that came out of situation. And
It
I know
was.
you and I have talked a little bit about how this particular loss impacted both of us in terms of who we are as attorneys and how we lead and how we show up for clients and things. And I know there was a pre-loss
Yeah.
Vanessa who was a lot tougher. I was known to make grown men cry at depositions. I was the bad cop. When there was a good cop, bad cop, I was always the bad cop. I mean, you probably can't see me like that. Litigation beforehand, I mean, I was tough as nails, really tough. But how about you? How did you change?
I mean, pre-loss Cassie, even though I was competent, I wasn't confident. I was a younger lawyer and I would get nervous before oral argument and feel a little queasy. I just kind of lost all of that because in my head, after losing Ella, I would just, nothing else felt comparable in terms of suffering. And so I knew I had survived somehow and continue to survive what I think is the worst thing a human being can survive. And there's a lot of agreement that loss of a child is the worst thing that any human can suffer. And I've survived that. And so when I'm headed into oral argument or speaking at a conference now, those butterflies they just went away because what's the worst that can happen? It's not going to be any worse than what I've survived. So I developed, ironically, just more confidence and less nervousness and being secure in my ability and the story I had to tell. Because so what, a judge asks a question that maybe I don't have the perfect answer to? Well, it's not life or death.
Yeah.
So it just kind of clears out all of the clutter from your brain, and I think it actually made me a better litigator because I wasn't having any of those nerves anymore and a better speaker, and I enjoy speaking more because I'm just not nervous
Well, it
about
definitely
things
put
anymore that I
no,
used to
it's not
be.
weird at all. It definitely put
Isn't
things
that
in
weird?
perspective for you, and you've
Yeah.
mastered the toughest thing you ever could. Not that you did it voluntarily or whatever, raise your hand to go through that, but resilience is something that just happens to you. It's not something you seek out. And then for me, I don't know if it was confidence so much that changed me, but I became very much softer. And I had heard this expression that loss and trauma either makes you a harder person, more brittle, more, I don't know, self-protective, or it makes you softer. And so for me, I definitely became a much softer
Yeah.
person. And I found my meaning in service to others. I mean, I really mean that. It's not just like, what people say. I found that the way I felt better about anything that I did, like the reason I get up in the morning and go is to help someone, to be of service to someone. So for clients, that's easy. I'm much more empathetic. I really can see where they're coming from, help them, and listen really, really well to what their needs are. I feel like my superpower is this pragmatic empathy. I try to be practical when I hear that. And then in terms of the firm and my leadership journey here, I'm very big on mentorship. When I work with associates, I really try to pour into them. I want them to be better lawyers than I am. I'm going to know I succeeded when I help shape someone's journey so that they're just excellent at everything they do and they feel good. Like, I don't know about you, but starting out at firms when I did, which was, before the computer was invented, it was like, get out there, do it. You'll learn. You'll learn by doing. And it was terrifying. It was just at times, it was horrible. And I never, ever want any of my people to go through that. So we prepare. If I'm saying, if this is your first oral argument, let's do a mock one, and we'll do that. And so that was
Yeah.
that was kind of, the difference is I just became a lot more gentle and careful with people, and I try to lead with kindness. It's funny because my firm has done for the last 2 years, we've done a bespoke leadership program for our senior attorneys that are on the cusp of becoming partners, and we're trying to help them, figure out how to do this leadership thing. How do you supervise? How do you give constructive feedback? And then also the business side of it, to be entrepreneurial and business development. At the close of our last session, I said something to the group, and they probably think I'm so crazy because lawyers don't talk like this. So at the end of the session, I said, it was really my privilege to be working with you all this year, and it wouldn't be a meeting with Vanessa if I didn't leave you with your affirmations. So be kind to yourself. The voice we hear the most in this world is our own. So make sure you're always talking with kindness. And they all look at me, and I walked out of there going, oh my God, they probably think I'm like a Fruit Loop or something.
If I heard that, I would just I mean, I am your biggest fan. If I heard that in that context, I'd be like, oh, she's the one I'm going to go to. She's the one who is going to be able to listen and help me out. So
Yeah, and then
that's great that
and
you're
in
doing
terms
that for
of,
them.
unlike you,
Right.
you had so much more confidence. I was absolutely terrified to speak again.
Well, that's where your trauma occurred. I mean, I can't even imagine having to relive going and speaking. And yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that'd be really
So
hard
I
to
had some full-blown panic
do over
attacks
again.
where I'd have to do my, breathing, because I always spoke. I, have been speaking for
Yeah.
years at ABA things and webinars and all kinds of stuff. But to this day, I still really have a hard
Yeah.
time going to Philadelphia. It's just, sorry, Philadelphia,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not in my good graces anymore.
So I was in the NICU a long time and the hospital before that. So 11 weeks total. I was like vitamin D deficient at the end of it. I got osteopenia
Wow.
at I was 29 years old, because these drugs flush through your bones. I mean, it was a lot, but the soap of the hospital, it's still this my same healthcare provider, and
Uh,
whenever I go in, the smell of it, I just wish they could change their soap
right,
brand because that smell of
right.
the soap brings me right back to those
Yeah,
days, and that's real, those are physiological consequences of trauma that people have to deal with, and I think I've done pretty well overall out of necessity. I had to go back to the same place
right.
because my kids needed follow-up
Sometimes you,
doctor appointments,
sometimes you just
so
can't avoid it,
what am I
and
gonna do?
and-
But it's beneficial to my practice too. I mean, you mentioned at the start I represent people with disability benefits, and I find that I can relate to suffering easier than I could have, at 28 years old with no health issues ever to happen to me. I know I can understand how somebody's life is disrupted. It may not be by loss of a child or loss of anybody, but loss of your physical capability, loss of your mental health. These are all losses that we as humans need to deal with. And kind of holding someone's hand and guiding them through to get their income to see them to the other side of it
right,
potentially. It's incredibly rewarding for me. I love helping my clients. I love being there for them in that way. And I have had, it's not always the case that people like you or me are able to
right,
return to work successfully. I have had people on long-term disabilities from loss of a child, and to help them. Thankfully, my team, they're really good about wanting to shield me from the details of those losses because they know that it would be too much for me. Because we read medical
right,
records, we take
right,
declarations, it's just a lot of detail. And they shield me from that. But of course, I'm aware of everything. It's my firm. I know that not every person is able to return to work after losing a child. So I'm grateful that I have been able to because my work is really rewarding, and I'm sure you're grateful too. But we've been in flexible enough environments where we
right,
could kind of adjust either our work situation
right.
or have colleagues who understand us and can adjust things with us because they value us
I know.
as humans, and not everybody has that
And
same
that's
situation
really
and they can't
sad. To me,
return
that's really sad if
in
they aren't there. And that would
yeah.
be, what I would want people to take away from
Yeah.
this episode. And thanks for coming on this journey with me, Cassie. I know this isn't easy stuff. Um,
Yeah.
I would want people to really think about is, what are people carrying that we don't know about? And it's easier just to be kind, just in case, you know, like lead with
Yeah.
positivity, lead with gentleness, and save the bad moods, save the go for the throat type of litigation tactics for somebody else because
Yeah.
they're not going to work on me.
I just roll my eyes when people behave badly. I feel like they don't have
Right.
bigger things going on in their life that they feel like that's acceptable. Because when you understand and when you're compassionate, and you've been through something, it does change you. You want to be a kinder person because you know that
I,
it's important not to add to other
I
people's
think that's
suffering.
it. And
It's
then,
important to
for
be a
firms,
light.
like I'm sure my firm didn't know what to do because I don't think anybody had been, a professional and had like a loss like this before. So I would just encourage them, hey, maybe bring in your EAP provider to talk to the folks in the office because nobody knows what to say about grief. Nobody does. Either they say something completely
Yeah,
inappropriate, or which I'm sure both of us heard that.
I know. I've
Ah,
come
good.
up with suggestions over the years. Like, it's always appropriate to say, there are no words, or I'm
Right.
so sorry for your loss. I can't imagine. Those are like, if you don't know what to say, saying that will be appropriate and comforting. But trying to relate it on the other hand to like, oh, I know exactly how you feel because my dog passed away last year is just going to why? I mean, why? Don't try to relate it to your own circumstance
Right.
unless you've
Right.
been through the exact same circumstance, you know? I actually lost a couple friends and I tightened some friendships,
Right.
people who were really there for me. I'm sure you feel the same, and they still are. It's my core circle. But I remember there was this one woman, we weren't close friends, but she was like, "Yeah, I know just how you feel because I had an emergency C-section and it was really traumatic." And her baby was like alive and healthy and full term. And I thought, I just couldn't. I didn't know what to say. And it was, a month after I lost my child, like it was really so don't and people who say, "Oh, they're in a better place." I mean, you may believe that and that may be actually true, but it's not helpful because when you've lost a child, you know that the best place is for them to be with you and your family. So like just you could probably Google it or ask ChatGPT and it'll give you some suggestions of things to say or not say, but
Unless
don't
you've
say
been
I
there
get
and
it
you do get
unless
it,
you've
you could
been there.
say,
Like
I hear
yeah,
you. And I had a lot of people ask me, what
I
can I
hear
do?
you. I
And,
hear.
and I didn't even know what I needed. So what I tell people,
You don't know. Yeah. I
right,
didn't know how to ask. I didn't know what to do, but I had a friend on the night of Ella's surgery who came and just sat in
yeah,
the
and that's
waiting
what I,
room,
I ended up
and I will
telling a
never forget
colleague
that.
of mine whose friend
She's just
lost a son similar to mine in college. And she's like, I don't know what to do. And I said, you know what? You could just sit there and be with them. You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything, just
just sit
knowing
there.
that you're there.
Yeah. Just knowing you're available,
Right?
you're there, writing a card, bringing a meal, simple things, really, nothing elaborate, just but yeah, just being there is
Yeah,
I will never forget my friend for doing that. She's one of the ones who is
yeah.
still in
And then
my
just,
very
on the
innermost
human
circle.
side for firm leaders or employers or anybody else, just, take that time to give people grace and give them the time that they need to get through
Yeah.
it. And they'll come out the other side, hopefully, being a stronger person or, with different skills. Yeah.
It's a roller coaster, right? So, like, you may think, "Oh, they're on the other side of it," or it's been sufficient time that I'm sure it's fine, and it may not be a good day or a good week, and you may be surprised that they're having a hard time, like, around the anniversary of the death.
So
I always take a day off,
I take off
and it's
Evan's
on the
birthday
firm.
and I take off the
Yeah.
anniversary of his
Nobody wants to
death.
be
And I just, because I know, I never know what I'm going to be like that day,
yeah.
you know? So
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I visit a
I
rose garden.
love
Her name's
that.
Ella Rose. So roses are every anniversary I go visit a rose garden. That's what my
On
tattoo is of.
Evan's
It's a
birthday, I
rose
encourage my
for her.
friends to
Yeah.
do a random act of kindness because that's kind of, what his deal
I
was.
love
He
that
was very
too.
kind to people. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for going through this, but I think,
No
lessons
problem.
learned is, be patient, be gentle with people, and if you're going through it, it's time, and it the loss never goes away, your grief never goes away, but you do find a way through it, and so that it can sit, besides you.
Yeah.
And I hope for both of our sakes at some point we don't look at ourselves and say pre-Cassie, post, Cassie, and the same thing for me. It's just those both sides can just
Yeah.
integrate, and we're just, who we are. So
No, that's a good thought. Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing the topic to people and talking about it in such a compassionate
thank
and
you.
kind way. That is who you are. You are compassionate, you are kind, and this topic is it's important and people don't talk about it enough. So hopefully it gives some comfort to somebody, even if they haven't gone through loss, but maybe they know somebody who has
Right.
suffered loss. Maybe it'll help them to
And they're
to
all
to see
different
it from
kinds
their
of losses.
perspective.
And
So
as you said, that
thank
it's not a grading. Some people feel different loss profoundly,
oh,
and
yeah.
grief is grief. So, and you're amazingly compassionate and kind too, Cassie. That's why we get along so well. I know. So, thank you for
Thanks.
coming on. And listeners, I hope you take away something wonderful from this podcast episode.
Thank you.